All right. So we have a new episode of Narrator Interviews Author. And today we're talking with Caroline Giammanco. And I've done several of her books, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. But hi, Caroline.
Hi, Boyd.
Um, First of all, let's talk a little bit about how we connected. We were part of a group of authors, narrators, artists who are all involved in creating books and audiobooks. And and I saw your Westerns. That was what originally attracted me to your writing because of my background, being from Texas and the kind of voice I have.
Yeah,
Um, I I know that that is one of my niches that I can do Westerns. And so we've done several of those, several of the smaller ones that include maybe 2 to 3 short stories, and then later on a longer one, and then a compilation of short stories. So we've worked together, and we'll talk about another book here in a minute. But let's talk about the Westerns first. What uh, why what brought you to those? Because they're not just typical Westerns. There's a little paranormal in there.
there's paranormal in some science
Mhm.
fiction, and some are just traditional, straightforward Westerns.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And I guess they started back when I was in high school and I started reading Louis L'Amour. And I haven't been a huge Western fan. It's not like I had to watch Bonanza or anything like that all the time.
Mhm.
But I mean, there were shows when I was growing up that were popular, like Alias Smith and Jones or Heck Ramsey. Shows like that that really caught my attention. I wasn't as interested in Gunsmoke or those traditional Westerns so much, but the ones that were a little more lighthearted or quirky, I really found entertaining. And then when I lived out west in New Mexico, I actually didn't live very far from where Louis L'Amour had his ranch.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which was pretty interesting and neat, I thought.
Mhm.
And all my years that I spent out in the West, because I'd grown up in Missouri and then went to college in Arizona and lived there in New Mexico and would travel to Colorado and different places, I kind of soaked in the culture and the landscape and just the basic atmosphere of the area. And I started writing short stories, actually Westerns, not that long ago, but it was just a fun change of pace because a lot of times I write science fiction and paranormal short stories. And I wanted something different because you can burn out if you stay in the same thing. And so I started writing Westerns, and I always try to incorporate places and sites and, like, just like I said before, atmosphere that I still remember from all those years that I lived out west.
Yes, yes. And in fact, you actually lived here in Roswell for a period of time.
I did. I actually lived in Roswell at the same time that the 50th anniversary of the alien crash
Hmm.
happened.
1997.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. You were just here for like a year or two?
that I was out of town for that celebration because I just didn't want to deal with the influx of all the tourists coming in. So I
Yeah.
wasn't for that. But my boys were in school and they had little projects that they had to do. I know one of the restaurants had the elementary kids draw covers for their
Hmm.
menus and things like that, and his was featured. So it was a
Yeah.
fun.
Well, and there are a few aliens in some of your writings as well.
Yes, there are. There,
Yeah.
with
So,
the
yeah.
I also wanted to say that I also, while I enjoy reading Louis L'Amour, I also try to write, I don't know, a little less chauvinistic view of the West. I try to have strong female characters
You
too,
do?
self supportive, resourceful women who are either doing it all on their own or who are equal partners with the men in their lives.
Yes, yes. I've noticed that, and there were several of those. Those stories are great. So we did those, and anybody who's interested in that will there will be links here, and we'll put up some covers here in the video. Um, but then we got into the book that is not fiction. It is really part of your story and part of the story of another very special person. And I want you to tell us about that. The book is called Bank Notes, and this is the revised. How does it say it? A revised version or the
Banknotes Revisited, the
revisited?
updated true story of the Boonie Hat Bandit.
Yes. Okay. So tell us about that because this is, believe me, this is an interesting story, guys. And this is the first memoir I've done, really. It's a memoir, but it reads kind of like a novel as well. But it's a true story and about a bank robber, really, and what happens in his life and in Caroline's life. So, Caroline, tell us a little bit about that. What led up to this?
Well, Banknotes was actually the first book I ever wrote. I had never even considered writing before that. Now, my degree's in English and political science, and I've taught English for years, but I never was dreaming of becoming an author. I thought it might be interesting and fun, but there never was a topic that made me feel like, this is it. This is what I'm going to write about until I met Keith Giammanco.
Mm.
And during the Great Recession, we kind of had parallel paths in a sense. I lost my teaching job during the Great Recession because the school that I absolutely loved was losing population and therefore funding, and they couldn't support 4 full-time English teachers in a school that now only had 181 kids. So I was last hired, so I was first fired because I hadn't gotten tenure there yet. So I desperately needed a job, and working at a prison was not on my bucket list. I can promise you that, but it was a job. And when I had lived out west, at different times, I had worked at alternative schools. So I wasn't unfamiliar with dealing with some hard case students. So I went ahead and applied because I needed a job. So I took a job there in June of 2011. That's when I was offered the job. I actually started July 5th. And it was a real eye opener. I went from public school and being the daughter of a deputy sheriff to finding out that it was a very corrupt system inside the prison. Very dangerous in a lot of ways that people probably don't expect. They expect it just to be the inmates that are a threat, but there are threats, actual physical, potentially fatal threats that come from staff members there too and supervisors. So I had taught there for about a year.
And which prison is this?
The South Central Correctional Center in Licking, Missouri.
Okay.
I had taught there for about a year when I needed a new tutor in my classroom. And so I needed to hire a new inmate employee, and several interviewed, and one of those was Keith Giammanco. And the instant we met, and it stayed this way the whole time, it's like we were long lost best friends just catching up. It wasn't anything creepy or like, hey, baby, can I buy you a drink kind of thing. It was just, oh my gosh, I can't wait to keep talking to you.
Mhm.
And this man who walked into my classroom, I ended up hiring him. He was honest right from the beginning. He said that should I choose to hire him, he thought that I deserved to know who I'd be spending 10 hours a day in a classroom with, which was very respectful, I thought.
Mhm.
And he said that he had robbed banks in the St. Louis area using notes. And so I thought, whew, at least he's not, an axe murderer or something like
Right.
that, that I've decided that, hey, I love talking to axe murderers. I thought, no, that would not be good.
No.
So he never had a weapon, never threatened anybody. And so I ended up being able to hire him. A couple of other teachers wanted to hire him too. I was able to hire him. And it wasn't until a few weeks into him working in my classroom that this young guy had come up to the desk where Keith was at, and he was saying, "Hey, come on, you know you are, just admit it." And Keith kept saying, "No, I'm not. Just go sit down, just do your work." And the kid was insistent. I say kid because he was probably like 19. He was in adult prison, but he was a young guy.
Mhm.
And he's like, "No, come on, admit it. You know you are. We all know you are." And Keith said, "Listen, I am way too high profile to lie about what I'm in here for. Have your family look me up. Now go sit down and do your classwork." So after the guy walked away and sat down, I looked at Keith and I said, "What was that about?" And he said, "The kid thinks I'm a chomo, a child molester." And I said, "Why would he think that?" And he said, "Well, I fit the profile." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Look around. Who in here are the pedophiles?" And I looked around. He goes, "Middle class, white men, middle aged, with no prior criminal
Mhm.
background." He goes, "I fit the profile." And I was like, "Oh, you do? Oh, no." And then he goes, "Yeah." He said, "So I get it from time to time." And I said, "Well, are you really high profile?" He goes, "Well, I was on the cover of USA Today and on Good Morning America." And all of a sudden it clicked in my head. My brother lived in the St. Louis area on the Illinois side. And so whenever there were St. Louis area news events, I would pay attention. And I knew the case. And I looked at him and I said, "Oh my God, you are the Boonie Hat Bandit." He goes, "Yeah, I am." And it wasn't something that he bragged about. It was just like, "Yeah, I did it." And that's where I first was introduced to his side of the story outside of what the news reports were and things like that. And it was actually a case that had caught my attention. I'd followed it. And so I was kind of surprised, but not shocked that that's who he was, because I knew that he had robbed banks using notes. So it made sense.
Mhm.
And from there, over the course of time, we, we would discuss the details of his case and what happened in court and everything, and how a lot of people, us included, think that it's a violation of his right to be free from double jeopardy, in that he was convicted and sentenced. He pled guilty in federal court to all 12 robberies and was sentenced to 6 years and 4 months. But then the state court, after he had already pled guilty and been convicted in federal court, used that guilty plea and conviction in state court for the exact same crimes, for 7 of the exact same crimes,
Mhm.
and gave him 3 times as much prison time, gave him 20 years. And it just seems un-American that you can be convicted twice for the exact same crime.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And the book goes into that in detail.
Yeah,
Exactly all of, what each of the each of the trials, the hearings, all of those things, it's covered in the book. And by the way, the book mostly is from Keith's viewpoint. However, there are several chapters, the opening chapter and then several later that are actually from your viewpoint. And that makes it interesting. Um, and I really I don't know if the word is enjoyed, because I really got in I felt like I knew Keith from narrating, especially his portion. I did get to visit with him one time on the phone, which was really helpful to kind of get an idea of the kind of spirit he has, and just a genuine, gentle person.
yeah,
And I tried to embody that, not necessarily in his voice. I don't, it's not that I sound like him, but I tried to become his spirit a little bit. And hopefully that comes across.
You did a really good job.
Yeah.
I have to say that you did an amazing job. You get us.
Hmm.
And talking to him helped you because you saw, wait a minute, this isn't your run of the mill thug criminal type. This
Right.
is middle class dad next door who made some really stupid choices that he
Hmm.
admits really, really bad choices.
Yes. Yes.
And he's paying for them. And his daughters are paying for them. I've been paying for them. But he recognizes that what he did was wrong.
Yes. Yes.
And in no way tries to shirk his responsibility.
Right. Right.
Our only complaint about the convictions is that we don't think anybody should be convicted twice for the same crime in
Yes.
America. That's our only hang up in the whole proceeding.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
And the way I started writing the book was because he was in a college class, a business class, and he and my other tutor at the time were, and I would proofread their papers for them. It's kind of a professional hazard when you're an English teacher that if you read something that needs a little tweaking, a little comma
Hmm.
here, oh, you should really start it out not with a don't say but at the beginning of a sentence, that kind of thing. That you tend to kind of step in and go, hey, let me take a look at this. And so that's what I was doing for both of them. And Keith is brilliant, but he's a horrible speller. He will admit it. I mean, when he writes me letters, he can misspell the same word 3 times on the same.
Hmm.
It's not good. And so he's able to laugh about it. And at one point, I said to him, if you ever want to write a book or a screenplay or anything about your story, you might want to have me edit it before you send it.
Hmm.
And he looked at me and he goes, I will. And it was like in that minute, we knew we were going to be connected through this story because at the time, we certainly weren't going, oh, we're going to end up married.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't anything like that. But we knew it was a project that we wanted to work on together. And we instantly felt like we were friends, even though, yeah, according to policy, you're not supposed to be friends with
Right.
inmates. But, when you meet somebody that your mind and your heart and your soul just kind of connect with,
Hmm.
you're just going to be friends with them. And we weren't doing anything
Right.
weird,
Right.
having sexual contact or anything like that with each other, no contraband or anything.
Uh-huh.
And so right then and there, it became I was going to edit whatever book he wrote. And then as time went on, because we worked together for a year and a half before I left the prison system, it became someday I'm going to write the story. And
Hmm.
so that's what we did.
So when did he actually start writing down on his side?
Well, um, let's see. On April 3rd of 2013, he told me that he loved me for the first time, which was its own
Hmm.
stressful, crazy situation that we write about in the book. And that day or the next day, I wrote chapter 1. I sat there, I didn't leave. It was the next day. I didn't leave for lunch. I stayed in my classroom while he left and went to lunch. And I just wrote down the introduction, chapter 1 to the book. And when he came back, I said, I just wrote chapter 1. Here, take a look at it. And that's where it started. And then from there, once we both realized, hey, this has started, this is going to happen now, he
Hmm.
started writing out chapters for me.
Mm. So
Yeah.
so he would write the chapter and then you would take it and do whatever editing
Right.
was needed. Yeah.
I smooth it out. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Wow. Wow. And that took how long?
Well, after October, when I left the prison, it took a while longer because we had to like send stuff back and forth. So that's kind of a funny part about this story that exposes the corruption inside the system
Hmm. It
is
does.
that it went through their mailroom.
Oh,
Yeah, every word of that book went through the mailroom.
and nothing was ever said as far as,
Oh no, they were not happy.
oh,
They were definitely not happy, but they couldn't stop it.
yeah.
And the prison in Charleston at Southeast Correctional Center, after he was transferred, that we wrote about, that you did a great job in the book with, um, they did their best to try to interfere. At one point, I had sent the entire manuscript to him, and you could only send 5 pages at a time
I remember that. Yeah.
in an envelope through prison rules. And I sent 39 um, envelopes, and we always number our envelopes if there's more than one so that we know if one's missing or something like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
And he only got envelope, I don't know, it was like 6 or 8. I think it was 8. He got envelope 8 and nothing else. And
Wow.
so I called the prison to find out what was going on. And the assistant warden said, "Oh, well, there's 50 envelopes here." I said, "Well, you have 38 envelopes because he got number 8." And he's like, "What?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "How come you didn't give him all 39 envelopes?" And they tried to say that I was breaking copyright law by sending in my manuscript. And I
Mm.
said, "There's no way I'm breaking copyright law." And he said, "Well, our lawyers are going to have to look at this." And I'm like, that's my own intellectual property. I can't break my own copyright.
Right. Right.
And they still weren't going to do it. And I had 2 attorneys that I'm Facebook friends with who got in touch with me when I had posted, "Hey, this is what's going on." They independently got in touch with me and said, "Based on 1974 copyright law, the minute you jot something down on a napkin, it's yours. That
Hmm.
you've copyrighted it."
Hmm.
And so the prison didn't want to listen, and I had to get a state legislator involved. His name was Brandon Ellington. He was from up by Kansas City, and Brandon looked into it. And within a day, Brandon got in touch with me and said that Southeast Correctional Center has assured him that I will never have a problem sending anything into
Hmm.
an
Hmm.
account. So yeah, it
Wow.
didn't make us good candidates for their Christmas card list.
No.
They were not really fond of us, and we've had
Right.
some interesting hiccups through the years
Yes.
because of their dislike of our shining some light on what's going on
Hmm.
in those iron walls.
Yes, yes. Now, and the book covers all of this in detail, but it also, for those of you who are interested, it also covers the the actual robberies
Yeah,
and the when he was caught. That he had he not done the 12th robbery, he probably would have never been caught. Is that correct?
that's what the FBI agent said when he was
Yeah.
arrested. He said, "If you'd stopped at 11, we never would have known who you were. We
Hmm.
had absolutely no idea who you were."
Right. So Keith goes into detail as to, some of the things that he learned on uh and what he did to to pull off that many robberies. So
Yeah,
that part is very interesting. And then the prison part is also just an incredible story of survival, you know?
yeah. Being two middle class people who normally would never be inside a maximum security prison, it was a real eye opener for both of us to see what was going on inside there on our tax dollars.
Yes.
And I talked about us being on parallel paths. And the Great Recession led me to needing a job and taking a job inside the prison. And Keith's financial desperation and fear that his children, he was the sole parent of twin daughters at the time, that they were going to lose their home and they were going to end up homeless, drove him to take drastic measures. And
Hmm.
they weren't the right measures, but sometimes when you're desperate and you're in a panic, you've got blinders on. You don't see any other possibility than what's right in front of you.
Yes.
And so that's what he did. And so that was also driven by the Great Recession because he had been an independent stock options trader,
Hmm.
and then the market crashed. And just like there were people in New York City who were doing desperate acts because of it, their trading houses had closed and they didn't have a job anymore and they didn't know how they were going to support their family. People were throwing themselves out of windows at the time. I was actually sitting next to a gentleman um, during the trip that I write about how I had gone to see my son in New York after he had gotten out of the hospital in Washington, D.C., and was recovering from his injuries. I'd gone to see him in New York the January after I left the prison, and I sat next to a guy who was a trader on Wall Street, and one of his best friends, a really good friend of his, had done basically the same thing that Keith had done. He lost everything and he didn't have a job to go to anymore because his house had closed. But every day that man got up, put on a suit and tie, grabbed his briefcase, kissed his wife and kids goodbye, pretended that he was going to work, and sat in Central Park until it hit him, same as Keith, where's the money at? And he started robbing banks with notes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And we actually had a conversation about how we wonder if people who are kind of drawn to the financial markets and things like that, if their mindset takes them someplace like that because it's what they're familiar with.
Uh, yeah,
And
that's quite
institution,
possible.
they're not going to go rob a Circle K.
Hmm.
They're going to go with what they know.
Right, right. And, just the details of what happened during the robberies, it's very, very interesting. So, those of you who are interested, I would love for you to listen to the audiobook, but if you're not an audiobook person, read the book. I
I
think
wanted to
you'll like
say,
it. Hmm.
I also wanted to say though, on that point about discussing the robberies, we tried to be very sensitive and
Hmm.
not making it seem like we were glamorizing or
No, you
glorifying
didn't.
the crimes at all.
Hmm.
I mean, he
That's
talked
right.
about the steps that went into how he pulled them off, but it in no way is meant to be any kind of insult to the people
Hmm.
who were the victims of the crimes.
Right, right. And that's clear. I think it's made very clear in the book. So let's bring it up to date though, because even though he has served far longer than probably should have, um, he's being released this year, this September. Is that correct?
September 24th, he'll have
Yeah.
17 years, which is the mandatory 85% of his 20
Hmm.
that he received from the state.
Okay. So,
And through his entire incarceration, he's never had a single write up.
wow, wow.
Yeah.
So what are the plans then on September 24th?
Well, his daughters are coming in from California,
Hmm.
and we're all going to meet where he's at now. He's at the Farmington Correctional Center in Farmington, Missouri. And we're going to pick him up and give him big hugs and bring him home. And
Yes.
a lot of people have been saying, "Oh, well, what do you have planned? What are you going to do?" and everything. And we're very low key about it. We just really are. For one thing, getting out of prison after that many years, everything's going to seem a little bit overwhelming for Keith. You
Hmm.
know, it's been a
Sure.
long time, and we're just going to take it just a step at a time. Like
Yes.
Keith said, step one is him getting out of prison. And so we don't necessarily have, grand plans. It's he's going to come home. and we're going to have our new home that we're having built here on the property where I'm sitting right now.
Wow.
And it should be ready just right before he gets home.
That's
And
amazing.
we're just going to enjoy having him with us.
Hmm. Hmm. Wow. So that's going to be a happy ending to
Oh, yeah.
this story. And so uh as we wrap up here, what are your writing plans for the future?
Well, after he gets home, as far as the true crime goes, after he gets home, we have a third book because I also wrote Inside the Death Fences after
Hmm.
Bad Notes, which tells my side of what happened, like how I ended up where I was.
Hmm.
And then we have a third book, though, that we're going to write. And we've had it planned actually since we worked together. And we've even had the title picked out. It's going to be called Off the Chain. And it's going to further deal with not just the corruption of the prison and prison officials, but also the behaviors of inmates. We figured it was
Hmm.
safer for us to wait till he was home to be able to talk about that, and why it's bad news for our communities and our country that there isn't better rehabilitation going on.
Yes.
And I think some of Keith's ideas about the need for rehabilitation will probably shock a lot of people because they think, well, he's an inmate, he's going to
Hmm.
want free for all or whatever. And it's not that at all. He's one of us. He's just a regular person
Hmm.
who has firsthand had to live around these bad behaviors, and
Yes.
he's what and who walks out those doors to go back into our communities. And better than anyone that I know, he has a real grasp of what is going wrong when it comes to trying to make people more productive and
Yes.
safe for our communities to be around. And he's got a theory. One of his things is these guys in there who don't want to follow the rules, he thinks they should break rocks all day long until
Hmm.
we decide that following rules is not such a bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that sounds like that's going to be another very incredible book, and I I just appreciate the opportunity to be the voice for banknotes and for your other books as well. So it's been a joy working with you, and hopefully this will be something we can continue to do.
I sure hope.
Um, yeah. Anything else that you would like to share?
Um, well, besides the westerns and besides the true crime, I also have a series called Into the Night,
Right.
which is each book is a collection of science fiction and paranormal short stories.
Hmm.
And book 6 is releasing on May 20th. I actually have books 7, 8, and 9 already written. They're just in the queue waiting for
Wow.
their little time to come out and shine
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
And I actually kind of tried to get as much writing as I could done in the last couple of years because once Keith comes home,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be sitting there bored with nothing to do.
No, that's
I'm going to
right.
have a life going on.
Uh-huh.
And so I thought I would put a little padding in there so
Yeah.
that we'll have books to come out even when we're busy.
Well, you've been prolific the last few years, that's for sure. Well, Caroline, thank you for spending this time, and we're going to put links to everything, and hopefully some new readers, listeners will want to hear the incredible stories, both true and fiction, that you've written. So, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. You do an incredible job as a narrator. You truly do.
It's been fun. Thanks.